Hello, Mr. Gibson here. So this lesson, we're going to build on what we did in 6.1, where we learned how to calculate measures of center, the mean, median, and mode, and also the standard deviation. Now, when we did that assignment, I gave you 3 problems of each. You basically did it by hand, right, on your own paper with a calculator, and you're able to work through the steps to calculate that. What we're going to do in this lesson is really calculate the same set of values, but this time use a Google Sheet to do so, okay? So this is going to be a little bit different kind of lesson in that I don't have a bunch of PowerPoint slides that I'm going to step through, but rather we're going to go into a Google Sheet and first understand a little bit what is a Google Sheet, or sometimes we could just call it a spreadsheet. And then we'll look at the actual Google Sheet that you'll be using in the assignment today. And we'll step through some examples of what you'll be doing there. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of my PowerPoint here. And I'm going to go over to just my normal kind of Google login here on Chrome. And the first thing is, where would I create a Google Sheet? So if we go up to the top right here and click on the waffle, there are some types of Google tools that you are familiar with using, right? You know how to create a Google Doc, use that in the Scout class all the time. You may have used Google Slides, right, to do a presentation for a class. But right here, you'll see Google Sheets. So if we click on that, and then I'm going to click on blank here, this will open up a blank Google Sheet. Now, a way to think of a sheet is basically a set of rows and columns. It's like a big giant table that we can put our data in, and it can be very large, right? We just see a few of the columns and rows here on our screen, but in reality, we can have hundreds of columns and even thousands of rows in our Google Sheet. Now, I'm going to make this just a little bigger here so we can see it, okay? Now, I'm going to annotate as we go along here. So I mentioned it's organized by columns and rows. So the columns in a Google Sheet are labeled as a letter, right? So these are our columns. And the rows we label with a number, okay? Now, there's many more than I circled here, but I just wanted to call out how we're going to identify a given cell. We call each square here a cell in our Google Sheet. Okay, so each one of these, if I were to just to do a little outline here, right, here's my cell. So there can be thousands of cells, right, in our Google Sheet. Now, a cell has 2 characteristics. The first is it has its location, or sometimes we refer to it as its address, right? How do we identify a particular cell? The second characteristic of it is its content. What do we actually enter into the cell? And these are 2 distinct different things, but they're both important characteristics of any given cell. So the content can be a number. It can be some text that we type in, or it could be a formula or math operation. And that's going to be very important for us here in this lesson. We're going to use a few of these formulas or math operations that are available to us, because the real power of a spreadsheet is to not just use it to enter numbers and create lists, but to actually analyze the numbers, to perform mathematical operations on them, okay? So I'm going to leave this up here. Well, let's do a couple more things. So back to this concept of location or address. So we define the location or address by its column and its row, okay, and in that order, okay? So this cell that I just highlighted here it would have a location or address. Notice its row is B, and its column is B, and its row is 6, right? So this cell would have a location of B6. Okay, it's as simple as that. Let's do another example. What if I had a cell here, this cell? Its column is D and its row is 12. Okay, so that would be cell D12. So this is how we identify the cell, but it can have an actual content. Now, what I'm going to do is enter in a value here. So I'm going to click. If you just take your mouse, you can click on any cell, right? And then once you click on that cell, you're able to enter a value for it. So remember, we can put in numbers, we can put in text, we can put in the formula. So let's say we just wanted to put in the number 25. So we click on that cell. I'm going to click on B6 here and put in 25. Okay, we just use our keypad and hit enter, and the 25 goes right in there. Let's go down below a few more cells here. What if I wanted to enter in some text, right? So I could put in my name here, Gibson, okay, and just type in Gibson for that, okay? Now, we can also do formulas or math operations. So let's look at an example of that. Let's say I'm going to, below B6, I'm going to put in another value here of 25, okay? So I have two cells with 25 and 25 of them. And let's say I wanted to add those together and put that result in the column below. Now, this is where we're going to write an equation or formula in the cell. Okay, now we know the answer is 50, so we could just type 50, right? But that doesn't really allow us to use the power of the spreadsheet, right? So how do I type in a formula that tells me to add these two cells? Well, this is where we're going to use the cell location or address. So whenever we're doing a formula or an equation, we always start with a plus. Okay, so I just hit the plus on my keyboard. Now, what do I want to add together? The first cell I want to add is B6. Okay, so notice I just type in B6 and it highlights that cell up above. Okay, and then I'm going to hit another plus sign, and this time we want to added that to B7. So I'm just going to enter in a B7 and notice it highlights. And then if I hit return or enter, boom, it gives us the result. Now, it displays the result of 50, but if I click on that cell, I can actually see what I've entered into it. And we see that right up here in this part of our display, right? This is the formula that is actually in that cell, but it's going to display the result of that formula, okay? Now, we can also click on the number value, and if it's just a number value, notice it now displays 25 up here. If I click on Gibson, right, it has the text that we entered up here. But if I click on a cell that I've entered in a formula, then we can see the formula that we have up here. Now, put an equal sign in front. That's another way you can always start an equation. It's just to put a plus or an equal sign in front of the first cell that you're going to use in there. Okay, all right, so those are just the very basics here, but you'll see how we're going to use this on the assignment to find the mean, median, and mode. Right, so I'm going to clear all of this, and I'm actually going to go to a different sheet. I just opened this one up to kind of show the basics of a spreadsheet. So the big idea, it's a big table with rows and columns, right? We have columns labeled by letters and rows labeled by numbers, and we can put cell values, numerical values, text, or formulas into the cells. All right, so I'm going to say goodbye to that one. And this is the spreadsheet that we're going to be using in the assignment today. So when you open this up, you'll have your own copy, and this is what you will see to get started. Actually, you'll see a little bit more here because we're going to do, for example, one together, and that's what will be in the spreadsheet that you're going to start in. Now, remember I said we're going to use the exact same problems that we did in the first assignment. So you want to have those handy, your piece of paper, or open up the PDF for assignment 6.1. But remember, what we did in that first assignment is find the mean, median, and mode. Okay, so in the boxes here, we're going to enter in the values that we're trying to calculate this for. So I'm looking at the original assignment here as I enter these in, and the values were 36, 82. Notice when I hit enter, it kind of automatically goes down to the next cell, 94, 83, 86, and 82. Okay, so we have our values entered in. Now we want to find the mean. Now remember, mean is just the average. Average means add up all the numbers and then divide them by the number of terms. Okay, so we're going to actually do that two different ways here in our spreadsheet. The first one is we're just going to add up each cell. So I'm just going to type all the cells in that I want to add. So I'm going to put a plus. And the first cell up here, the 36, remember, is in A4. So I'm going to put in A4 plus A5, right? The next one plus A6, and so on. I keep doing this until I have all of my cells added up. So it's going to be A4 through A9. If I hit return, boom, there it gives me my result of 463. And if we look up here in the display line, we can see the equation that we put in for that cell. Okay, now there's an easier way than to have to add individually all 6 of these numbers up, and we can use what's called the sum function. Now, all spreadsheets have a whole list of different mathematical functions or operations that they can do. The one we're going to use here is we're going to put equals. We'll always put equals for the sum, and then SUM. Okay, now the sum of what? So we need to give it the cells that we want it to find the sum of. And here we're going to enter in a range rather than, we could type in the individual cell locations with a comma in between, but an easier way is to do a range. So the first cell is A4, okay? And then the second, or the last cell we want to do, the end of the range, we're going to enter that by first putting in a colon, and then A9, the last cell. So basically what we're saying here is find the sum of A4 through A9, and we have to put that range inside parentheses. And we hit return, and look, it gives us the exact same result, and it should. Okay. Now, we want to find the mean, okay? And the mean, remember, is to take the sum and divide by the number of terms. So let's write a little formula that does that. Okay, so I'm going to add, now my sum is in A11, so A11, and then I'm going to divide that by 6 because we have 6 terms in here. And if I hit that, it shows me my mean, right? 77.1, and then you can see it rounds it off to a whole bunch of decimal places. That's okay, we'll just leave that as is. Now, there's actually even a simpler way to do this in a Google Sheet. It has a function that is simply average, right? So if I hit equals and then type average, same thing, I just need to tell it what the range is of the values I want it to find the average for. So I'm going to put in that same range, A4 through A9. And remember, always put parentheses around your range and an equal sign in the front. Okay, if you don't put an equal sign, it'll just treat it all like a text and it won't calculate anything. So you'll know that that's missing. Okay, I hit that and notice I get the same result, but here I just did it with one simple cell, right? I didn't have to first find the sum or add them up individually and then divide by 6. That function is doing that for me. And the same thing for median and mode, right? Let's do that. We want to find the median. So I'm going to hit equals. And so there is a function called median, and we just have to tell it the range again. So we're going to say A4 through A9. And there's our median, 82.5, right? If you compare that to the first assignment, you should be getting the same answers here. And the last is the mode. Now, this one's a little bit trickier. We're going to hit her in mode, but notice up here, the list, it gives us a couple different options for mode. We want to have multi, M-U-L-T, because we might have more than one set of values that occurs most frequently. So we may or may not, but this way we'll cover all the bases. So I'm going to go dot M-U-L-T, and then once again our range. So A4 through A9. Okay, now we hit that, and 82. That makes sense, right? Because we have 82 that occurs twice here in it. Okay, so notice we let the Google Sheet do all the work for us, okay, by just first typing in our values and then using the functions in here. So what your assignment is, right, is to do the same thing we just did, but do it for problems number 2 and 3. Look at your homework assignment and enter in the numbers here, right? So for example, let me just take us to this first step: 74, 89, 71, 70, 68, and 70, okay? And then see if you can come up with the functions or formulas in the cells below that will find the sum, find the mean or average, and then find the median and the mode. All right. Second part is to do the same thing, but standard deviation. Now remember, we did this by hand in a table in the lesson, right? So we're going to create that same table. I've already done that for you, but we need to enter in the values and then some formulas as we work our way across this table, okay? So first thing is we want to put in our values, or X values. So from the original assignment, this is going to be 43, 48, 41, 51, and 42. Okay, now if you remember, to find this standard deviation, the first thing we have to do is find the average, or the X bar. So we're going to do that down below, and we're going to use that average function we just used on the previous page. So average, and the range this time, right, is going to be from B5 through B9. Okay, and it tells us that, right? It says my average here is 45. Now we want to put that average in each of the cells in the next column, right? The X bar, that's our average. So rather than just type 45 in here, what we're going to do is say, I want to take the value of B10, right, where I calculated my average, and put that in each of these cells. So I just have to simply put plus B10. Notice it highlights our average value, and if I hit enter, it puts it in. Let's do that in each of the cells. So plus B10, plus B10, plus B10, plus B10. Okay, we have our average in here. The next column, we want to subtract, right, the average from our original X value. So here's where we're going to write a little formula. I'm going to say plus, so the first cell here is going to be B5, right? And then I want to subtract from that the next number over, C5. So 43 minus 45. Now notice I'm not typing in the actual values, I'm typing in their cell addresses, and then it will do this for us automatically. Okay, so there we go. We got -2. Now this is going to suggest to autofill, but I want you guys to have practice typing this in, getting used to these. So this is going to be now B6, right, minus C6. And then again, B7 minus C7. And B8 minus C8. And then B9 minus C9. Okay, so we found the difference in each one of those cells. And then the last column, right, we're going to take that difference and square it. So how can we square a number? Well, we're going to type it in kind of the way we would do in Desmos, right? We're going to first say, okay, I want to take what's in the column to the left. So that's going to be D5. And then I'm just going to use the little arrow up and put in a 2. That means take D5 and raise it to the second power. If I do that, I get my result 4. So let's do that for the rest of the cells, right? Plus D6 raised to the second power, plus D7 raised to the second power, plus D8 again, raised to the second power, and then plus D9 raised to the second power, okay? So how do we find the standard deviation? We now need to take all these values that we've squared and find their average. So again, let's use the average function in Google Sheets. So we're going to say equals average, and then the range is what's we have right above us. So it's going to be E4 through E9. Okay. And again, if you could always click on the cell and then look up here in this edit line, and it will show you what the formula is. Okay, there's our average. What's the last step? We want to take the square root now of that to find its standard deviation. So notice I've given you that equation right here. This is what it's going to look like. Okay, there's a function called square root, but it's SQRT. So we're going to go equal SQRT and then parentheses, square root of what? Well, we want to take it of the cell right above it. So that's going to be E10. And we hit enter and we get our standard deviation, 3.847 ... Okay, so that replicates what we did in the homework assignment, but there's an easier way, because guess what? There is a standard deviation function in Sheets that will do all this for you. So here's what it looks like right here in this cell, standard deviation. It has a little p after it. This is for the population. In other words, we want to find the standard deviation of all of these values. So let's see if we use that function, if we get the same result as we did, kind of using all the steps in the table. So I'm going to hit equals, and then STDEV, standard deviation P, and then I'm going to enter in my range, right? So I'm going to go back to my original values here. So B5 through B9. And if we hit return, guess what? We get exactly the same value that we got. So once we know how to do this in Google Sheets, if I ask you to find the standard deviation of a set of values, all you really need to do, right, is enter in these set of values right here. Get my pen going. These set of values right here, and then use the formula, right? So really 2 steps, enter the values and then use the standard deviation formula. And we won't necessarily have to, do all of these steps, but I want you to do that in this assignment and then use the standard deviation function or formula, just so you get some good practice here working with Google Sheets. All right, so let me clear this. And what you'll see is if you scroll down, you'll see I've already set up the table for you with the values in it for the other 2 problems, number 5 and number 6. But I would like you to then see if you can write the formulas or the operations, right, that will allow you to fill in this table, kind of do it the long method, and then use the standard deviation function and see if you get the same result. All right, that's what the lesson is about. So take a shot at that. We'll review and work on this together in class.